Hello, welcome. We're here to talk about the dangers of workplace bullying. This conversation is in honor of Dr. Antoinette Bonnie Candia-Bailey. We are all in a state of collective mourning and wanted to have a conversation about the dangers of workplace bullying. We've all been talking about the news. We're all heartbroken about her loss. Again, we're expressing our sincere condolences to Dr. Candia-Bailey's family, friends, and the Lincoln University family. We are very sorry to hear of her loss. And Dr. Hollis and I want to frame this conversation to talk about some of the dangers of workplace bullying so that we are more aware of the signs that something is problematic, and also to really help us understand that we're not alone. So if you're going through workplace bullying, you are not alone. There's a lot of research out there. I do want to give a trigger warning to this conversation. We will have mention of suicide. Okay, so just to be clear about that. And also to note that if you and or anyone else experiences thoughts of suicide, please go to your nearest emergency room or call 911 and let them know this is a mental health emergency. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is also available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by dialing or texting 988. Okay. So again, we're going to be talking about suicide, so you are aware of that. And again, this is a very difficult topic, yet a very needed topic, because we know the devastation, that our community is experiencing with Dr. Candia-Bailey's loss. And we really want to have an open conversation about some things that are painful, just so we have an understanding of workplace bullying and we know about resources. So if you don't know me already, I'm Dr. Kamani. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, a toxic job survivor, and a toxic job liberator for Black women. And I have my guest here, Dr. Leah Hollis. And Dr. Leah Hollis is an expert in terms of researching workplace bullying. So I'm so happy to have her here today. So Dr. Hollis, if you can introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, and so sorry we're coming together on this tragic occasion. My name is Dr. Leah Hollis. I am the inaugural Associate Dean of Access, Equity, and Inclusion, the College of Education, the Pennsylvania State University. I've been studying workplace bullying over 15 years. And while it started out as me looking at it as a universal topic, it happens to everybody, and it
Mm-hmm.
does happen to everybody. It disproportionately happens to those who are not in the power positions.
Yeah,
Well, we know who those folks are: people who look
yeah,
like you and me,
yeah,
women, people of color, LGBTQ community, folks who do not traditionally hold those more executive positions. And because bullying is based on a power differential, if
mhm,
you have diminished power, you're more likely to face bullying. So
yeah,
nice to join everybody. And one thing, if I can stress out of this whole conversation, you do not have to be alone.
yes.
So many people are going through workplace bullying. It's about two-thirds of my respondents over
Mhm,
the last 10 years, regardless, like 10 different studies. It's somewhere
mhm,
between 58 and 62% say they've witnessed it, which can be
mhm,
just as health harming,
mhm,
or
mhm.
they've experienced it.
Yeah.
One thing that really helped me out, and I've been bullied kind of
Mhm,
viciously in the past, even though
mhm,
I study this.
mhm.
You've got to share with your family and share with your friends and your colleagues,
Yeah,
because if you don't tell, they can't help you.
yeah.
And so by telling people what was going on with me, which I'm really not at liberty to get into too much of
Mhm,
that, I've had people come forward and say, hey, there's an opportunity, or could you join me on this grant project, or perhaps, we can do something on a conference, or just general advice or things that they have done when they were
mhm,
bullied. So
mhm,
often, those who face workplace bullying isolate themselves,
mhm.
which makes it even worse. So, if there's
Yeah,
anything that people get from this conversation, please speak up to somebody: your spouse, your kids, your parents, your colleagues. Find a community of support, because they're out there, and they
yeah.
want they want to help. They want to help.
Yeah, yeah. So, in addition to the research in terms of you're not alone, we're also going to talk about resources that are available to you. And, I was just telling Dr. Hollis before we came on live that I recently was notified about Dr. Candia-Bailey's dissertation topic, which was looking at the hardships that Black women experience while climbing the academic ladder in academia.
Mm-hmm.
That is just, it just makes it even more heartbreaking, right? And Dr. Hollis, I know that you did an op-ed, which was outstanding, dying to be heard. And you talked a lot about some of the research findings. So you said that sometimes people who've experienced bullying can consider suicide as an option. Can you speak a little bit more about that in terms of how people can experience that to the point where suicide is considered to be an option?
Well, if we think about our jobs, right? So many of us have student loans or have, childcare or elder care, your car note, your house note, your rent, what have you. You are particularly dependent on the relationship with your job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your job is brutal and is psychologically and emotionally abusing you, and you can't find a way out, you feel trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And then, unfortunately, suicide can arise as the escape hatch. I
Mm.
can't get out of it by getting another job, or I've tried to, like for example, with Dr. Candia-Bailey, she applied
Mm-hmm.
for FMLA, seeking
Mm-hmm.
some relief. Those
Yeah.
are signs that she was trying to put distance between herself and her tormentor.
Yeah.
Interesting, to apply for ADA or FMLA, she had to have the documentation. So she wasn't just abusing the law to do it. You have to have the
Right.
documentation. So
Yeah.
suicide, unfortunately, can become the last ditch escape hatch or the rip
Mm-hmm.
cord. I can't take it anymore, so I'll just end it all. And
Yeah.
it's really very much a shame that we get to that point. Um,
Yeah.
but if you're desperate and having the cognitive and emotional stressors,
Mm-hmm.
and oh, learn this one, right? Some of the medications that a psychiatrist may prescribe
Mm-hmm.
can lead to suicidal ideation as well.
Yep. Yep.
So if you
Yep.
find yourself needing Valium or Xanax or any of those opioids or what have you, read the fine print.
Mm-hmm.
It can lead to, yeah, the very antidepressives that are prescribed to us
Yeah.
can create suicidal ideation. One of the ways to combat that, it's called a contract. I would imagine, doctor, that when you're working with clients or whatever, if you have somebody who's suicidal, and I have heard of other people using this as well, is that you sign a contract with yourself, the psychiatrist or psychologist or social worker, and a partner, whether it's a parent, a loved one, a friend, your cousin, and it keeps the person, oh my God, I'm having these feelings, but they signed this contract that said, I will tell my older sister. I will share with my cousin. And so that's a great tool to help people ground themselves that there are other people who care about you and would be just so disheartened if you actualized those ideations. So a contract can also help keep people from executing um, that suicide.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of mixed perspectives on contracts within the mental health field. But I think the main gist of what we're saying is that starting to recognize the signs that you are being harmed. If you are taking psychotropic medication, make sure you talk to your psychiatrist and that you know the signs of increasing thoughts of suicide, which is very important. Well, we're not psychiatrists, but we're saying to you, please make sure that you are in constant contact, regular contact with your psychiatrist, particularly if you're starting to have these thoughts, right?
Right.
Now, I think too, Dr. Hollis, part of the outrage that many of us are experiencing too, so we talk about that collective grief, the outrage is that she tried to get help, that she tried to get help. So when she was shot down in those ways, and we of course don't know exactly what happened, but just the outrage that this woman was reaching out for help and nobody was there to protect her, right? And I just think about Malcolm X. The most unprotected woman in America is the Black woman. And so it's feeding into that. And I just saw a video from Anne-Marie Archer, the anti-HRHR lady, and she was just talking about no job is worth your life. And so my hope is that through this conversation that Black women or anyone watching this really recognize that no job is worth your life. I know that you are committed to the work. I understand that I was a toxic job survivor as well, but no job is worth your life. You have options. You are able to leave, okay? So Dr. Hollis, can you talk about some of the additional physical and or psychological symptoms that people might experience when they're encountering workplace bullying?
Sure. As far as the physical symptoms are concerned, you may have weight loss or weight gain. Weight loss comes because you just don't feel like eating. Weight gain comes because you're comforting yourself with, whether you're a sugar person, you're doing Dunkin' Donuts and waffles and IHOP and syrup and whipped cream and all this other stuff, or maybe you're a savory person, you like salty things and nachos and Doritos, and none of those things are good for your system. So people sometimes try to turn to substances. I started with food, but we also find increased smoking or alcohol use or things to bring comfort to you because you're not finding safety at work. Other physical things that can happen is insomnia, because when you're under attack and your mind is racing, trying to strategize on how to deal with the bully, maybe you're not sleeping, you're not eating. Also, if you develop anxiety, and a number of people develop anxiety behind this, it also include anxiety attacks and panic attacks. Other things that can happen is just loss of concentration. In a recent study I did, a number of women had commented on low birth rate for their children, early delivery, irregular menstrual cycles, miscarriage, seizures, high blood pressure, heart attack, stroke. The body is not designed to withstand that constant stress.
Yes.
So those are some of the physical signs. The psychological signs are somebody who used to be a happy-go-lucky person all of a sudden stops coming to meetings or is not as lively. They don't make eye contact. They're hiding. They're isolating themselves. They come late. They leave early. They take more sick time. In other words, you can see somebody engaging in all that avoidance behavior because the toxic environment is overwhelming. So I'm gonna work away, or I'm gonna take. And in some of the questions I've asked in my surveys, people will purposely create childcare stuff, elder care stuff, doctor's appointments, extended lunches, scheduling meetings on top of the meeting that you have with the bully to get out of it. And also, for anybody in HR out there, look at the turnover. So in some places, people will vote with their feet. And so you have a great position that opens up, but nobody applies for it. And people only stay in that position like maybe a year or two, and then you're posting for it again. Well, you need to look at the environment around there and say, why are people running out of what otherwise looks like a plum job? So that voting with your feet and the avoidance behavior also are signs. And I would say women and men deal with it differently. Women, in particular Black women, in the studies that I've done, will stick it out. They know they're being bullied, but Black women more than any other group.
I'm gonna fight you. I'm gonna fight you. You're not gonna run me out of here. I'm strong, right? And it ends up hurting us.
Yep. And men, Black or white, will be like, you know what, peace, 2 fingers, I'm out of here. I'm not putting up with this. Men are more likely to just, I'm not putting up with it.
Interesting. So I think because of our social programming as Black women, that we are conditioned to fight and to stick it out and all these other things, but it ends up harming us. And so there's no winning in a situation where you're constantly being harmed. And you also talked about, Dr. Hollis, the extreme impact that chronic stress can have on the body, so physically and psychologically. And I was thinking about allostatic load. So when you're under so much chronic stress, eventually you just give out. So
Yeah.
physically, psychologically, you just kind of give out. And then I was also thinking about what you said too, and I think it's important for the listeners to pay attention to this. So what Dr. Hollis is talking about is pay attention to any changes in baseline behavior. So if your colleague, if your friend, if your family member, they start acting in a way that's different than their regular baseline behavior, please tune in and pay attention and ask them those questions, right? So Dr. Hollis, I know your research, we're talking about workplace bullying in general, and your research, if I'm correct, deals with people in higher ed. Is that correct?
Yes, for the most part. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. So can you share with us, for those in higher education, which again is so timely because of Dr. Candia-Bailey. So can you share with us, based upon your research, what was the percentage or what has been the percentage of those in higher ed who have reported experiencing workplace bullying?
Over the past 10 to 12 years, respondents from my study are reporting anywhere from 58% to 62%.
Ooh,
Close to 2/3 are
that's
facing workplace
horrible.
bullying within 2 years of when they responded to the survey.
That's
Um,
horrible.
Other folks have written in and said, gee, if you had said throughout my career, the number would be higher. And keep in mind, the number I'm talking about isn't just that you've been bullied, but you've witnessed bullying. So,
Mm,
for example, at another institution, I was at a meeting and the bully and the department head got into it, and the entire faculty was blown away. In
mm.
fact, we had a woman on staff who was 8 months pregnant, and she went home and had that baby that night because it was so stressful.
What? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
mama,
Wow.
baby, and mama were fine, and
Mm,
good for her. She left about 3 months later. I mean,
mm,
toxic environments. If you're familiar with Nancy Krieger's work, she is an epidemiologist. I think I pronounced that right, out of Harvard, who
mm,
wrote a book on social theory and health and breast cancer, and had
mhm,
discovered that Black women who were born in the Jim Crow South and raised in the Jim Crow South
mhm.
would be more likely to activate their estrogen receptors and be more likely to face breast cancer.
Wow, that's
Compared to
fascinating.
women in the North who were raised in the North did not have the same kind of stress. So she was
Wow.
able to uncover that about the chronic racism and the stressors that go along with it.
Mm,
Workplace bullying dovetails right into that about the stressors and how they can unfortunately activate the things in our system that can hurt us, such as
yes,
cancer.
yes,
So
yes,
please see your doctors and take account of your stress and find ways to give your body a break. You gotta give
yes,
your body a break. Yeah.
absolutely. And Dr. Hollis, recently I had a panel with Black medical doctors, and they were talking about the impact of stress on our bodies, and they talked about weathering. So that chronic stress, there are things happening to our bodies that we don't even know. So our organs are aging at earlier ages, and as Black women, we're now dying at earlier ages because of the
Yeah.
chronic stress. So
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to look at. And this is what I asked them. Well, what do we do about the situation? How can we address the stress issue? They said you need to remove the source of the stress. So if it's a toxic job, if it's workplace bullying, you have to get out. You have to get
Yeah.
out. No matter how hard it is, we have to prioritize our own well-being, our physical and our psychological health, right? So in your research, I know that you also mentioned some complexities, in terms of for women, for people of color, for those in the LGBTQ plus communities. Can you speak to in terms of the complexities in terms of the research on workplace bullying as well?
A few years ago, I was doing interviews for one of my studies, and a woman had mentioned, she's like, well, wow, what part of me do you hate? Is it the woman part? Is it the Black part? Is it the age part? And
Wow.
you can't dissect our identities.
Right.
And so there was a
Intersectional identities.
they're all together, right?
Yes.
Intersectionality. So there's a study I did, it was about 5 years ago, and the more complex your intersecting demographics are, the more likely you are to face bullying. So first
Mm,
woman, then a woman of color, then a woman of color who's a religious minority, then a woman of color religious minority who's also LGBTQ. The
mhm,
further away you get from unquote this dominant culture,
mhm,
white male, the
Mhm.
more likely you are to face bullying. And
Mm.
additionally, did a study. I did this on a community college sample, but then
Mhm.
I asked the question, well, who is not bullied?
Mm. Good question.
Who is not bullied are those who, and no shade, no disrespect to anybody, if you make the choice not to get your doctorate, not to seek tenure, not to seek promotion, budget, or supervision. So
Mhm.
when, unquote, women leave their place and try to ascend the ladder, much like it's so wild that you're talking about her dissertation,
Yes.
that's when the bullies come, is because you're trying to rise. You're trying to achieve and excel. If you
Mhm.
are now, some women, and I understand that, it's called constrained choice, where you choose to focus more on your families, and that's
Mhm.
lovely. And
Mhm.
so, if you decide that you would rather focus your time on your family life and you're content with your job exactly where it's at, whether it's at entry and middle, you
Mhm.
might not face bullying as much unless you happen to threaten somebody or one of your peers.
Yeah.
Some even argue that, yeah, it's perhaps a very fulfilling life to focus on your family and not worry about the job.
Mhm.
But I'll also be the one to say, if we aren't in the C-suite, we as Black women are not in the C-suite, if we're not in these other levels, we're not going to have access to change it because,
Yeah.
yeah, because it takes everybody, right, to make a community. Folks who decide to focus on their families, folks who decide to focus on their careers. But
Mhm.
more importantly, the issue is about self-determination. So if I decide for myself, I
Mhm.
want to rise the ladder, I should be able to do such unencumbered.
Mhm.
You decide to rise is when the bullies come out.
Wow.
You're a threat because you want what they have, right?
Yes, yes.
Power.
And how dare you step out of your place,
How dare,
right?
yeah.
So, in terms of stereotypes and the social hierarchy, and what's interesting, Dr. Hollis, is that many of us are brought into something about pets a threat. So, again, three Black women researchers came up with the pets a threat. So, Dr. Keisha Thomas, Dr. Juanita Johnson Bailey, Dr. Rosemary Phelps. So, pets a threat, if you're not aware, anyone who's listening, pets a threat deals with when a Black woman comes into the workplace and she is sought out because of her outstanding skills. She does an excellent job. She's a pet. Oh, we love her. She's so great. Dr. Hollis is so smart. Oh, we love her so much. However, when Dr. Hollis starts outshining other people, then it shifts in terms of how she's seen, how she's treated. She's the threat. And so you're also talking about that issue about when you get out of your place and putting us in our place. And
Right.
so much backlash that we encounter in the workplace. And Dr. Hollis, think about, as Black women, we're the most educated in the nation. So we are very educated. We're going out, we're getting these high positions, we're doing all these things. But I think a lot of times we're not ready or prepared for the extreme attacks once we get in
Right.
the positions, the extreme efforts to undermine us, and so many other things, right? So, Dr. Hollis, we were talking also, I mentioned that I'm in Puerto Rico right now for a conference.
Hmm.
And, when I read your op ed piece, it was saying that only Puerto Rico is the only area within the United States that has good legislation about workplace bullying. I was very surprised about that. Can you speak about some of the state legislation in relation to workplace bullying?
Sure. To my knowledge, there are 5 states, in addition to the territory of Puerto Rico, that have policies: California, Minnesota, Utah, Tennessee, and Maryland. Here's the issue with those policies:
Hmm.
they're really designed to protect the employer.
What?
So, yes. So, most of us in workplace bullying circles have noticed that, wow. So, if my organization has a single training on sexual harassment and includes some information on workplace bullying, that organization is indemnified. And if there's a
Wow.
manager amongst them, at least the organization is protected.
Wow.
Also, workplace bullying is not actionable legally on its own, except in Puerto Rico. A lot of these places say, if you've done the training, if you've done the perfunctory things, then you've done what you have to do to prevent bullying, which is different
Wow.
than, say, internationally. What do we have? Canada, France, the Scandinavian countries, Turkey, South Africa, and Australia. There's probably some more which have prohibited workplace bullying on the federal level, making it
Wow.
actionable alone. Yeah, Canada has had that for probably about 10 years now.
Hmm.
Now, it's very similar to the harassment we see in Title VII legislation, except with Title VII, it has to happen because of your protected class, because I'm Black, because I'm over 40, because I have a disability or what have you. Whereas bullying happens, sometimes it happens for any reason. And even if it's motivated by racism or sexism, assailants know not to invoke the N-word, or not to invoke the early calendar, or not to have the different icons that point to racism or sexism or other xenophobia. So I think in some cases, workplace bullying is a sanitized version of racism and sexism. It's just the folks are smart enough not to invoke those epithets. That's
exactly. So you made reference to federal, right? So can you talk a little bit about the federal laws, and as you said something about independent legal action, right? You talked about protected class statutes and taking independent legal action. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. So let's imagine that I'm in a workplace and my boss makes sexist and racist comments, whether about me or my family or my dress or my culture. I can use those things about race and gender and file an EEOC complaint. That's an independent action. I believe you crossed the line and harassed me about my race or gender, and there's a number of protected classes, and then I can go to the EEOC. Independent.
Okay.
Workplace bullying. You can be bullied all day long, and unless someone invokes those protected classes, you don't have independent action. You can't go to the EEOC and say, I'm being bullied.
Right.
Now, here's the weird thing. Let's suppose you file a complaint because of racism, sexism, disability, what have you. And then after you file the complaint, you face bullying. That bad behavior can be retaliation. And retaliation is the single biggest charge in the EEOC. It's I filed a complaint and then something bad happened.
Yeah.
And something bad happening could be as simple as your budget was cut for no reason. They made you change your office. They changed your shift at work to a less desirable one, or a number of other things that something bad happened to you. But workplace bullying can only be categorized as retaliation after the initial complaint of a violation of Title VII.
Wow.
Whereas in Canada or France or Australia, if you're being bullied, you can go straight to a complaint. You don't have to prove that it's tied to protected class status.
Right. So all these different hoops and all that, right? And I think that might prevent a lot of people from even feeling that they have any recourse, because they're like, well, I don't have, it's not really something that, So it just makes people feel more alone. So can you also speak to what are some of the types of responses that employees may encounter when they try to report workplace bullying? So, that ties into the whole HR and, how many of us, myself included, I thought one thing of HR, I had a rude awakening when I went to HR. So what are some of the types of responses that people might encounter in the workplace when they report workplace bullying?
I think that's a great question. A few years ago, I wrote a book, HR Perspectives, looking at vulnerable populations, workplace bullying. And I did a study with human resources, because human resources personnel are understandably, sorry, HR folks, blamed for, I went to HR and they did nothing. So I asked HR, what's your perspective? And a number of HR folks noted that workplace bullying is not a charge for us. HR has a boss just like the rest of us.
Right.
So VP of administration and HR reports to them, or maybe they report to, I don't know, the CFO, or they report to, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Unless the people above HR are charging HR to tackle this issue,
Wow.
HR does not have the power. Think about it. If you go on a conference, it's because your boss said, yeah, I think you should go, or at least permits you to go. Or if you decide to teach a certain class, you've developed it because your boss has given you the space to do it. So with
Mhm.
HR, so often the organization has not given them the space to combat workplace bullying. So then what happens?
Wow.
If you're at a place like, and I'm going to call them out because I love this place, University of South Carolina has a
Mhm.
whole system and process for dealing with workplace bullying because the organization itself has
Mhm.
made it a priority. And so if you're at University of South Carolina, you can certainly report bullying and you will be heard and there will be hearings and there will be an investigation and they take it seriously, even though the state of South Carolina doesn't have a policy. But
What?
the
Wow.
university makes it a priority. Same thing
Hmm.
with Alamo colleges in Texas. I visited with them and they have a policy. Even though Texas does not have an anti-bullying policy, the
Mhm.
institution does. So
Interesting.
you go to HR, you also want to look at how has HR responded to other instances when
Mhm.
it's reported?
Yes.
How other people who have been targeted by bullying being treated?
Yep. Yep.
Are they being supported? Were they forced out? Did the bully get more aggressive? Hmm. Because that a lot of people report that I reported it to HR and it got worse. So
Yep.
since
Yep.
there's a policy, or if there isn't a policy, then what happens next is HR calls up the bully and says, "Hey, did you know that Leah called me and said you bullied her in a faculty
Yep.
meeting?"
Yep.
And now the bully's like, "I'm going to get her."
Yep. Yep.
But that's a
That's me.
structural problem
Yep.
because the institution doesn't have a policy, because HR hasn't been given guidance on how to deal with it. They're just the front line. And because
Mm-hmm.
the bully has not been reined in.
Right, exactly. Dr. Hollis, okay,
Sure.
that part, right? So when we think about HR and nobody really helped you and all that kind of stuff, that's when I talk about a toxic system. So when
Yes.
you think about workplace bullying and you're thinking, oh, it's just the one bully, no, it's the whole system is toxic because more than likely people in that organization know about the workplace bully. They know about this person because either you've reported about this person and or other people have reported about it, but they don't do anything about it. So the
Right.
fact that they collude with the workplace bully, that emboldens the workplace bully to really run amok. And the organization is invested in really protecting that workplace bully. And so we have to recognize when that happens, when you recognize, wait a minute, I went to somebody and this didn't nobody had my back. Again, that's important for you to take a pause, take a reflection moment and say, you know what? Is this the place for me? do I
Yes.
do I want to stay someplace where I'm going to continually to be attacked and it might get worse because you're right. HR is going to go back to the workplace bully and tell them exactly what happened. So can you talk, Dr. Hollis, in terms of when this may happen? You go to HR, you try to report it, nothing happens. What possible impact or what have your research noted in terms of the impact that it has on people when they go to HR, they go to other people within the workplace for support and nothing happens? How does that generally impact them?
Well, it's kind of like realizing you're in a forward area or you're caught out there unprotected.
You're
So now
out there.
the target has to decide, if I shrink and go insular and
Mm.
avoid people, will this storm pass?
Oh,
Probably not. Um,
no.
what also, because once you report it, it kind of it can escalate
It's a
unless the
target on your back. Now
yeah,
now you become really, really targeted.
yeah. And
Hmm.
sometimes, I mean, I'm going to go back to the civil rights, right? So I often say, MLK did not walk across that bridge in Selma by himself.
True, true,
Ashley Judd did not start the Me Too movement by herself.
true.
So if we're going to fight workplace bullying, collective action typically is the way to do it, when a group comes together and
Mm.
says, we want this policy. We're going to
Yeah,
work together to craft this policy.
yeah,
We are going to put these systems in place to support this policy.
yeah,
It's hard for one person to fight the system, but a
yeah,
collection of people, whether it's the faculty union or your AAUP or our staff union or what have you, a collective can make a big difference.
Yeah.
It
And
really can.
I think it really depends on the environment that allows for that collective space, right? Because I think a lot of us, myself included, was in a work environment that was ruled by fear and intimidation and retaliation. So there was great fear of the collective. And so it was like, if you say something, you're kind of just out there. And so I
Right.
think a lot of us have that experience where we don't have that opportunity. And so when we think about that, it leads me to my next question. You talked about organizational betrayal.
Yeah.
What is that? And how does that play out, or how have you seen that play out?
I came across this is Jennifer Fried's theory. She's out of the University of Oregon. She has her own center. She recently retired, and she categorizes organizational betrayal as first, we all depend on our organizations for salary, our health care, etc. We have a relationship with that
Mm-hmm.
organization. And
Mm-hmm.
then if we go to that same organization and complain about something that affects our safety, our emotional or psychological health, and
Mm-hmm.
that organization does nothing,
Mm-hmm.
that's the betrayal. So, for example,
Mm,
Jennifer Fried's study, she might talk about, unfortunately, a young co-ed might be sexually assaulted at a frat party on
mm-hmm.
campus, even off campus. The young
Mm-hmm.
co-ed reports this to Title IX.
Mm-hmm.
Title IX does a sloppy investigation and nothing happens. So this young co-ed has been betrayed twice. First, by
Uh,
the assault that happened in her own college environment, and second,
yeah.
by an apathetic group that did not raise to the occasion to investigate and find out what happened. There are
Yeah.
so many young people, men and women, who have reported such assault and then find themselves that the organization won't investigate. How this
Mm,
applies to workplace bullying is if,
mhm,
yeah, you are having a great time at your organization, you get a new boss, a new
mm,
dean, a new president, a new provost, doesn't matter, and that
mhm,
person starts abusing you emotionally and psychologically, and the
mhm,
organization does nothing.
mm.
The
And you
apathy.
know that they know. You know that they know. That's what makes it the betrayal, right?
They always know.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I've done several consulting visits, and people will say, it's like, gee, the person who should be here all of a sudden decided to take their kid on a college tour. All of a sudden they're sick today. And it's like, you all
Hmm.
know who the bully is. Yeah. And the bully knows who
Exactly.
they are too. The bully knows,
Exactly.
yeah, they,
Exactly.
they know.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I know that we're getting more reports about what happened to Dr. Candia-Bailey. So more information is coming out. Can you speak, Dr. Hollis, in terms of, because you were sharing things that I didn't even know. So can you share with the audience what were some of the things that she was experiencing? So we talked about the FMLA and trying to get short term, and they rejected that. Can you speak to some of the other things that were happening to her that were devastating? Can you share with the audience what those things were?
Sure. First of all, as I understand it, she left a position in New England to come back to her alma mater. So she's
Mm-hmm.
coming back probably with all this alumni love and thinking that
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be a great environment, and probably quite shocked to find
Yeah.
out otherwise. I understand, as I was watching some of the newsreels earlier today, that
Mm-hmm.
even at homecoming, um, she might have been this wonderful hostess of her school, but
Mm-hmm.
her friends had noticed her withdrawing, that her
Oh,
energy was diminished, that she
okay.
after she was VP. So, the bright
Yeah.
lights are up and it's homecoming. I mean, that's a big student affairs thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When those bright lights went down, her colleagues noticed that she had commented she was just hanging in there. She was very sad.
Mm,
She had commented on some mental health issues. And I offer that up not because there's anything wrong with that. We
mm-hmm.
all have different cognitive things that come up depending on the stress that we're facing.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
that she had tried to avail herself of an American with Disabilities Act protection, or with FMLA.
Mm-hmm.
I also understand that she got a poor review from her
Mm.
president and asked for a performance plan or a meeting to be very specific, and he sidestepped that. So,
Wow.
okay, so you ask somebody specifically, how can I perform better? And then they ignore you. Well,
Right.
then is it about me personally and the skin that I'm in, or is it about my performance?
Yeah.
So I understand she went into despair. And from what I understand, they had also mentioned, I think she was in campus housing. I'd have to double check on that.
Mhm.
So her losing her job only 3 days before she committed suicide also meant they were going to expel her from her apartment.
That's
So it was like
horrific.
this total undercutting of who she
You
was.
talk about organizational betrayal.
Yeah. And she'd gone to the board, and most boards say they don't want to hear it. But she went to
Wow.
the board. I mean, who are you going to go to? You're the VP. You can't go
Yeah.
to the dean. You can't go to other faculty. You're going to go upline, and the president
Yeah.
reports to the board.
And the president was the alleged bully.
Yes,
Yeah. So he was the one sideswipe. He wasn't talking to her. She was trying to get clarity and try to make things better and she was trying to do all these things and she was ignored.
she was ignored.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
So
often,
heartbreaking.
targets of bullying are ignored.
Yes, 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 yes. So, Dr. Hollis, I know this is a very heavy topic that we've talked about. And, I know that we talked earlier about our intention is to really help people watching this, particularly Black women, to know they're not alone, but to also know about resources. So, can you share what are some of the things that can be done about workplace bullying? Because it can make you feel very helpless and hopeless. What can
Sure.
be done about workplace bullying if you're experiencing that?
I wholeheartedly recommend finding a counselor, whether a psychologist or psychiatrist. But I say this also, find somebody who's culturally sensitive, who
Hmm.
understands that what workplace may look like for you as a Black woman. And of
Hmm.
course, I'll open the aperture here, or you're Latin and indigenous or what have you. We all have these different cultural backgrounds that inform how we receive the workplace.
Hmm.
Find a counselor who is sensitive to those cultural nuances. And it's
Yeah.
okay to try on a couple counselors.
Yes.
That's okay too. Another resource, a treatment that I am aware of, if I don't know if you're familiar with EMDR.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
It
Hmm.
is a non-invasive, non-prescription type of treatment where, similar to rapid eye movement when you're asleep, when
Hmm.
you're awake, you are taken through a series of questions and rethinking about past traumatic issues. It
Hmm.
doesn't erase the trauma, but it does refocus the trauma in your mind. And so it's not as big as a trigger.
Hmm.
Find support groups, find somebody you can talk with,
Hmm.
even if it's just your friend, someone who you can commiserate with. Other things people do is say, I'm going to focus on something else. They
Hmm.
might decide to throw themselves into a new hobby, or they might decide to throw themselves into writing a book, or they
Hmm.
may decide to travel or do something to get your mind away from the abuse at work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Also, try to find out what the laws are in your state about protected class. I mean, the
Hmm.
EEOC is federal, so it's pretty much the same. But
Hmm.
also, is there a whistleblower component? Maybe you caught the bully, stealing, because if the bully will break your heart, the bully will break other policies too.
Right. Right.
Try to find out.
Morally bankrupt.
Yes,
Clearly. Yes. Deeply
morally.
insecure. Yeah.
Department of Labor is another place, the EEOC. There are also state level commissions here in Pennsylvania. It's the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and I'm on our advisory committee here in the state. Um,
Hmm.
Talk to people and
Hmm.
find out what also has been successful.
Hmm.
Another strategy, if you are determined to stick with your career, as I was, get yourself out there, go to conferences, try to find, even if they're regional, where you
Hmm.
can find other people who really appreciate your work,
Hmm.
appreciate what you bring to your field. So
Hmm.
if you can't get, I have a dear friend of mine, he says, you can't get love at home, you got to find it out there at the conference. So think about it when you go to a
So you
conference,
can pivot. So you can pivot, right? So
pivot.
sometimes we're so committed to the work, and what we're saying is you can still be committed to the work, but maybe not at that place. So if
Correct.
the place is harming you, then start looking at your other options, and so start exit planning. And Dr. Hollis, I appreciate everything you shared, and my perspective as a toxic job survivor who experienced workplace bullying, and I know you experienced workplace bullying as well.
Mhm.
That it's very hard to heal when you're constantly under attack because you're in panic, you're in trauma mode. So as you're
Right.
going to the workplace, you're hyper vigilant, you're looking around you, you might have nightmares, you might have that dread of going to work, all those things. So what we're saying also is once you identify the source of the stress, the source of what's harming you, then start making those steps to pivot. So Dr. Hollis talked about going to conferences, start exit planning, start getting coaches, be in therapy. All those things will help you to pivot. But what we're saying to you also, Black women, what we hope that you hear is when you stay in these environments that are harming you, more than likely it's not going to get better. It's probably going to get worse because as you are vocal about what's happening to you, then you become more of a target. And so again, it's important to recognize you have options and to explore those options, right? So Dr. Hollis, if there's a Black woman who's watching this conversation right now, and she might be watching it live or maybe the replay, and she can resonate with what we're talking about, and she's experiencing workplace bullying, what words of wisdom can you offer to her? What would you say specifically to a Black woman watching this right now?
I love this quote from Audre Lorde. Your silence will not protect you. Too often, we believe that respectability politics and being quiet, suffering, and silence will
Mm-hmm.
get us through. No.
No.
All that does is help you bottle it up, and all that angst and bile and pain build up in
Mm.
your system.
Yes.
You have to find a way to express what you're feeling, whether it's in with your friends, whether it's with a counselor, with your family.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is when you share with people who care about you, and even just share with people who are human beings who respect your humanity,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be amazed at people will come to you and say, hey, I have a spot on this panel. Might be great exposure for you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I just found out about this group trip that the university's taken to, I don't know, Ghana or Puerto Rico, maybe, or maybe you should join us.
Mm-hmm.
There are other safe spaces that you can immerse yourself into
Mm-hmm.
while you're planning your escape
Yes.
wherever I'm going to call it Bully University. I have an article
Ooh.
called that. But if you're in Bully University, there
Mm.
are things you can do in the meantime to protect
Yes.
your heart.
Yes.
And it's okay to cry. It's okay to just fall out once in a while. It's probably a great
Mm-hmm.
emotional release. I'm not suggesting you do it in your office so the bully can use it against you,
Right.
but in a safe space with your family, your friends, what have you,
Your therapist.
your therapist. Also, take a vacation. We are great at not taking a vacation, and those
Mm-hmm.
vacation days are there for a reason.
Right.
Take
Right.
and know the policies. One thing
Mm.
that I have learned is when you know the policies, whether you're facing problems with tenure and promotion, and I'm working on an edited volume right now about Black women and tenure and promotion at both PWIs and HBCUs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, know the policies about the EEOC,
Mm-hmm.
know the statute of limitations for when you have to file,
Mm.
look at your university policies. Maybe there's something embedded in there that you can use, whether it's about collaboration or teamwork or what have you. But
Mm-hmm.
be a scholar of your state, local, and federal policies, so
Mm-hmm.
you know how if you're going to mount up a fight, you know how to do it as well. You know the rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
know the rules are screwed up too, because sometimes the rules are screwed up.
That's true. That's true. And you talked about sometimes we're in these situations, and I just want to speak to this briefly too. That this is something I've dealt with and I'm still healing, right? So I've resigned over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. I'm still healing, but I think what a lot of us experience too in the workplace, especially when we beat ourselves up that we allow people to treat us in a certain way without recognizing that we were responding in the best way we could in that moment because of our circumstances, right? So we couldn't just go off on people, even though we wanted to. But sometimes that can turn into self loathing. and self-blame. And so I just want to say to Black women or anyone watching this right now, to give yourself some grace. You know,
Yeah.
if you are experiencing workplace bullying or you have experienced it before, that you respond in the best way that you could. So please don't engage in the self-loathing, the self-blame. That's something that you really want to work on in therapy also. You can practice self-forgiveness. That's something I still have to practice. So self-forgiveness is very important. So Dr. Hollis, as we're winding down, can you share with the audience about your work and how they can contact you and how could they can learn more about your work?
Sure. Well, the best way to get me, I am have my own consulting group. It's called Patricia Berkly LLC, and the tagline is www.diversitytrainingconsultants.com. And on that website, there is an email. I answer my emails, and so can certainly reach out to me that way. And if I'm also at Penn State, if you Google me at Penn State, my email comes up there as well, and I'll answer either of those. What I will
Awesome.
certainly say, if you're facing bullying, one of the things we as human beings go through is that reflex of shame. What did I do wrong? What is
Mm-hmm.
it that I did to bring this to my doorstep?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
not your fault.
No,
It isn't.
no.
Please tend to go after somebody they perceive to have less power, somebody they perceive who's going to take it, someone who they think won't fight back,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody they think is a threat.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the bully's problem.
Mm-hmm. That's their insecurities.
That's
Yeah.
their insecurity. So your
Mm-hmm.
job is to protect yourself
Yes.
and to find safe spaces until you can get away from that bully. But there's nothing to be ashamed of. If anything, the
No.
shame should fall on the bully who's lacking humanity.
Those morally bankrupt people, deeply insecure, right? So that projected incompetence, that projected insecurity, they try to project it onto you because it's a way for them to distract from their own lack, right? So
Yes,
we are more than enough. So they might get in your head, start thinking you're less, you're more than enough. That's why they're intimidated by you. So just keep that
right.
in mind. And just to share resources with you, so Dr. Hollis shared resources with you. I also would strongly suggest that if you are experiencing workplace bullying and it seems like a hostile, toxic work environment, please contact Anne-Marie Archer, the anti-HR lady. We also have a masterclass that you can get on replay, which talks about getting your severance, getting your coins, all those things, okay? So these are resources that are available to you, which I'll have in the description section. So Dr. Hollis, as we're winding down, I do want to I want to give honor to our community as well,
Sure, yeah.
just to see their comments. So a lot of thank yous. It's a necessary critical conversation. I've been there. The American medical system is in general, and mental health services in particular, are unbelievable obstacles to care. Yes, there are obstacles. And my hope is that even if there are obstacles, that you still persevere. Okay, there are obstacles. Yes, I won't discount that. Weathering is real. Yes, Black mental health professionals are increasingly essential to our communities. So true. So true. Happy New Year. My condolences to her loved ones.
Yes,
Absolutely,
absolutely.
absolutely, and to the Lincoln University community as well. But Black women have a tendency to bully and terrorize each other. We must teach women of color that it's not okay to push each other to gain clout and rank. I was literally just talking about this with Dr. Hollis. So I just did a video on my YouTube channel about this, and I was asking or saying, well, what happens when the workplace bully is another Black woman? Because I've gotten so many comments to my videos about it's a Black woman, it's another Black woman, and I've done a lot of videos on this. So check out the playlist on my YouTube channel, Lifting Us with Climb Consulting Wellness Services. The playlist is all skin folk and kinfolk. I'll try to put that in the playlist for in the description
Mhm.
section. But Dr. Hollis and I are in conversation about having more conversations about this particular issue in terms of Black women, because there's some complicated dynamics. And I'm telling you, this comment comes up so much. Okay, so hold on tight. Okay, we'll talk more about that.
Mhm.
Good evening, Dr. Hollis. Right on. Today, the bully in higher education comes in the form of wealthy donors, certain political parties, etc. Are there
Yes.
studies on such bullies? So they're asking if there's studies on those kind of bullies.
I know what you're talking about, and I think about the name of the scholar escapes me right now. But it's happened a couple times where the donors who give goo gobs money, literally say, well, if you don't remove X, Y, and Z, if you don't do this and that and the other. I mean, that's what happened at Penn with the president, is that some of the $100 million donor from Wharton said, if you don't remove the president, I'm going to take my toys and go home.
Wow.
So yeah, that is a form we've seen. Oh, it was the woman from North Carolina who went there and went to Howard.
Oh, Nicole Hannah-Jones.
Yes.
Yes.
That happened with her as well, where it was a wealthy donor behind the scenes that said, I don't like her work.
Wow.
It takes the institution to say, you don't get to interfere with the academic freedom of another scholar.
Right.
I do not know of a study like that, probably because someone would have to be so prominent, like Nicole Hannah-Jones, right? She's just, I mean, she won the Pulitzer. I mean, she's on Front Street all the way. So the donors would know about her. But if she was not as prominent on, this is what we were talking about, who gets bullied, those who ascend the ladder. If she wasn't as bright of a star, she might have gone through and without too much incident because she wasn't so prominent to knock off. It's a shame to say it that way.
It's true.
Yeah, if you're prominent or have notoriety or have that positive image out there, you can become a target quicker because you're out there. People see you.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting. In fact, I'm going to put a video in the description section. I just saw a video from Jenny Clark, and she talked about how the star performers, the star employees, are the targets of workplace bullying, which is so counterintuitive. So you're like, wait a minute, why would the star players, the star performers be the targets? But just like what we just talked about. So the bullies are deeply insecure and they feel threatened by the star performers, the star employees. So I'll put that in the description section as well, okay? Faculty are particularly nasty to one another, and directors and faculty can terrorize staff. Oh, God. Yes, that's horrible. Been ostracized and demoted for speaking up. Collective cold shoulder, pretty much. Yes, I was demoted as well for speaking up. So I absolutely know what that feels like. It's horrible. But for me, that was yet another sign I needed to get out, okay? Does nothing, nothing. That's me right now. Yes, she was in her campus apartment. So speaking to Dr. Candia-Bailey, she was in a campus apartment. Then institutionally, how do we encourage the academic community to become more involved with the voting of College Board candidates? The entire upper chamber and the institution failed. Yeah. So, you know, I'm pretty sure that Lincoln University is going through a lot of internal examination, and I hope that they take appropriate recourse. Of course, there's nothing that we can do to bring Dr. Candia-Bailey back, but let them know, let them see that that was not okay, what happened to her, right? So I'm sure more information will be coming out about what happens at Lincoln University. Your silence will not protect you. Ashe, amen. You plan a safe exit similarly to how you would exit an abusive relationship. So true. There's so many parallels. Absolutely. Yes, please hit the like button on this YouTube channel. Thank you. Thank you. This is, so it supports to other Black women. Share this video with other Black women. This is a really important message. Thank you for sharing that. So again, give this video a thumbs up. Nice topic, the dangers of workplace bullying. Let's see what else. Thank you, both sisters. You're welcome. This is so impactful, empowering, and inspiring. Good. Love your channel. Thank you for this resource. Thank you for watching. Thank you for creating this space. Thank you again for watching. What an informative discussion. Congratulations on an excellent presentation tonight. Thank you. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel. Yes, so that's Marissa Price, my VA. So yes, so give this video a thumbs up. And as we're winding down, and I saw someone else said, this is incredible. Thank you so much. So as we're winding down, as you're watching this video, my hope, Dr. Hollis and I hope that you were able to receive valuable information from this discussion, and that you listen to what was said here, that you take this seriously, because it is very serious, and that you share this video with at least 2 other Black women. Okay, so we're trying to lift each other up, and we are out here really hurting in these workplaces, and many of us are suffering in silence. So please share this video with other Black women so that we continue to uplift Black women. Dr. Hollis, any last comments before we wind down in the video?
find a community of support.
Yes.
Whether it's your family, whether it's friends, whether it's a sorority, your church, your mosque, your synagogue, find a community that's going to hold you, in support and love you through whatever escape that you are seeking. So you come out on the other side.
Yes.
Sure, you're going to be a little beat up, but you'll be stronger and you can help others.
Yes.
Please don't isolate yourself. There are people who care and love you and will help you through.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
not
Yes.
alone out there. Find those people. And if you
Yes.
find a bad one, just strike a line through it and keep going.
Keep going. Keep
Just 'cause
trying to find.
it says, "Oh no, you're crazy. That's in your head." Okay, strike a line through that and keep going.
Yes.
Keep
I'm gonna quote Glamazzini, who said, check the tree before you pick the fruit. So if you are telling people things and they're trying to minimize your experience, don't tell them your experiences. Move on to somebody else. Find a supportive community. I cannot emphasize therapy enough. Please go to therapy. I would suggest a Black woman therapist. I have a video that talks about how to find a therapist. There's also going to be information description section about how to find a therapist. And as we're winding down, I want to remind everyone again about safety considerations, okay, safety planning. So if you and or anyone else has any thoughts of suicide, please go to your nearest emergency room, call 911 and let them know this is a mental health emergency. You can also contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by dialing, calling, texting 988. Okay, so we're signing off. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. And again, share this video with at least 2 other Black women. Give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel, Lifting Us with Climb Consulting Wellness Services. And we will see you later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.